First annual Haggin Oaks Golf Expo. My name is Ken Morton Jr. and I am filling in the best I can for Frank LaRosa. Frank is the host for ESPN 1320's Golf to Go. You hear him every day on 1320. He is down for the count with a little back pain and injury, so I'm filling in the best I can today. So we are glad that you could join us. The next 20-25 minutes are going to be pretty fun. We're going to be walking through a little bit of golf history here in Sacramento, and as I know firsthand, because I've had a chance to grow up in the household and kind of live it myself, we have somebody here who knows more of it than anybody on the planet. So he was originally went to work here at Haggin Oaks way back in 1958. Became a club repairman himself and eventually an assistant golf professional, partners with the original head pro Tom Lopresti back in 1971, and is in his 58th year here at the Haggin Oaks Golf Course. Please give a warm welcome for Ken Morton Sr.
Thank you, Kenny.
I thought we'd maybe kind of start with by date a little bit. And I know Haggin Oaks, even though we were built in 1932, isn't the first city golf course. There was one down the street, down Auburn Boulevard maybe, and give a little background on kind of how the city of Sacramento got into the golf business and that first course.
Yeah, well, actually, the original course was built in Oak Park way back in the early 1900s. And then they moved to, they made another course on J Street, downtown J Street. And then they came way out here and built a sand green course just on the other side of Watt Avenue. That's over there by the Ball Diamond. And then Del Paso Country Club within the next year did the same thing, built a sand green golf course. In those days, we didn't putt on greens or grass. They actually leveled out the sand and putted in from there. And there still are a few sand green courses. I know of one over in the Midwest in Missouri, and I know of one also up in Fairbanks, Alaska, where it's hard to grow grass. But there's not many left. So yes, golf did grow. I would say the first, the arcade golf course is what they called it. That was our first course the city had, and then the second one was William Land Golf Course, was built in the 1920s, and it's still there. The old original clubhouse is where Fairy Tale Town is today, and it was a par 5 on the first hole, went down to where the green is today. So it's been chopped up a little bit to make the park a little bit more friendly to more people, but other than the last hole and first hole, the course is pretty much the same as it was built way back in the 1920s.
They had some very famous golfers like Mr. Geiberger that actually grew up there at William Lane Golf Course, didn't he?
Yeah, Alan Geiberger, who they call Mr. 59, because he shot the first 59 in the history of the PGA Tour. He actually lived a couple of blocks from William Land, and that was where he came from. That was his original course that he learned on. Yeah.
Flipping back over here to Haggin Oaks, which it wasn't called that originally, but the city had some good foresight to hire a architect that would go on to be very famous here.
Yeah, in fact, Kenny, I might even go back before that, and then we'll kind of talk about how we got into the facility we have here today. But before Haggin Oaks, there was a guy by the name of James Ben Ali Haggin. And James Ben Ali Haggin actually had a horse ranch on this property, and the original grant, the land that he owned, went from the American River all past McClellan Air Force Base and from here over to the river. It was a huge piece of property. At one time he had as many as 1,600 horses. He was politically strong enough to be able to make sure that he got the original railroad through the middle of this property, which borders the golf course. And if you're going down hole number 11 and you look over on the other side, you're going to see some barns over there, and those are some of the original horse barns that that James Ben Ali Haggin had, and he had 2 Kentucky Derby winners off of this property. He also had a horse called Salvatore that held the mile record for almost 30 years. And so this was a huge thing, and after a while he actually took his entire horse ranch and moved it to Lexington, Kentucky, and he was one of the original horse breeders in Lexington and created the whole horse thing over there with all the derbies. So he was a very famous guy. So the word Haggin comes from the gentleman who had the property here way back in the late 1800s. And then the city actually purchased the large strip of land here up and down. There was no Capital City Freeway on this side or I-80 freeway on the other side at that time. Auburn Boulevard was the big road, and the original clubhouse here, built in 1932, was down at the end of the second green, and it was out where the freeway is today. And it was that money that they got when the Caltrans bought the land. That was that money that they used to be able to build the arcade golf course. To answer Kenny's question, yes, the city of Sacramento actually hired Mr. Lopresti, who was at the time at William Land, and before that he was the caddy master at Del Paso Country Club, and he came from southern San Francisco near Daly City, and so they hired him here, and then they hired a guy by the name of Alistair McKenzie. Alistair McKenzie is without a doubt the most famous architect ever to build golf courses. He actually redesigned Pebble Beach. He actually helped redesign St. Andrews, and he helped Bobby Jones design the Masters Golf Course in Augusta, and he built Cypress Point. And the construction man that he had at Cypress Point, who built several of his golf courses, when they came here to Haggin Oaks, he got enamored with Sacramento, and Sacramento, after he built the golf course, Sacramento hired him, and he was the golf course superintendent here for 30-something years after the golf course was opened in 1932.
Mr. Mac McDonough.
Mr. Mac McDonough, a very well-known guy, and he was such a valuable asset to the city of Sacramento that he actually built Bing Maloney Golf Course, designed and built that as well. And then he also built and designed the arcade golf course over here. He built the front 9 and the back 9 for $250,000, which today would probably cost a minimum of $5 to $8 million to build. So he was quite an expert at minimizing costs and keeping things under control. When I started here, Mr. McDonough was here, and every single morning I would see him in his khaki pants and his khaki shirt and his boots walking down the first fairway. He walked every single hole every single day to make sure the course was ready for the customers. He was quite a guy.
We were a PGA Tour stop in the late 30s and early 40s too, weren't we?
We were. My previous partner and the original pro here, Tommy Lopresti, was a guy who was really ahead of his time, and he was very creative, and he had built a lot of relationships because he was a pretty good player, and he was also a guy who made friends easily. And the next thing you know, in the middle 30s, he was able to acquire a tournament here. Now, it's kind of hard to imagine what a PGA Tour stop was in the 30s compared to a PGA Tour stop today, because the winner of those tournaments won $400 or $500. And I know Ben Hogan, and I think it was the last tournament we're here, he won his first check as a PGA pro in Sacramento at the Haggin Oaks Golf Complex. Which was then called, originally it was called the Sacramento Municipal Golf Course. It wasn't called Haggin Oaks. So it got renamed again, and then it got renamed to the McKenzie in 2001. But that's an interesting story about the PGA Tour stops. I tell you, if you have time, you should go in and look at the tables, because we not only have all of the names of the players that played, but how they finished, what they shot, and what their the amount that they won. I mean, some of them won $10, some of them won $20, and it was just enough money to get on the train and go to Reno, which was the next stop after here. Before here was Oakland, and so some of them even hitched rides on some of the freight cars where they didn't have to pay. They snuck on the train. I mean, those days were quite a bit different than they are today.
You mentioned Tom Lopresti. He was here 60 years as a head golf professional, and I know was a National PGA Award winner. You were partners with them and had as deep of a relationship as anybody probably outside of his wife, Ruth. Maybe give some background on Tom.
Well, Tom came up really, I would say today we call it the other side of the tracks in San Francisco. He was of Italian descent, had lots of energy.
Was a boxer.
He was a boxer originally, a very volatile, up and down kind of a guy. But you know, what really made him special was he never forgot where he came from, and as he got to do pretty well as a golf pro, he always looked out after the kids, and he always looked out after the people who, you know, were not so lucky in life. And Tommy Lopresti was a very special person with a great big heart. He was very well connected nationally. Was a hell of a mentor for me. Got me started here when I was really just in high school, and I could never ever repay what he did for me. And really, there's lots of people that at one time, when they started building the country clubs here, like Northridge Country Club and like Sierra View Country Club and Valley High and El Macero, at one time, every one of the head pros at all of those golf courses had worked for Tommy Lopresti. I mean, he was that kind of a guy, and he's a special man to be. I actually worked for him from '58 to '71, and then in 1971 he and I became co-head professionals and partners, and then in 1991 he went to work for me until he finished his 62nd year here, and he passed away not too far after that. But he was a special asset to the game of golf. He was known as Mr. Golf for Northern California.
One of those special projects you mentioned about him taking people under his wing. There was a young Mexican migrant worker who came into Sacramento by the name of Rudy Lozano, who might be the most popular person to ever work at Haggin Oaks, including my dad and Tom. Maybe tell Rudy's story too.
Well, Rudy was a truck driver. He was from Mexico originally, and he was a truck driver in Texas for a while, and somehow he migrated up to Sacramento, and he walks into Tom Lopresti's office, and he says, "Are you the boss here?" And he says, "Yes." And he says, "Well, I'm looking for a job." And Tommy Lopresti said, "Well, I really don't have any openings right now." And he says, "Well, if there's I don't care what there is to do here." He says, "I'll do anything because I need to feed my family, and I'm just up from Texas." And Tom says, "Well, can you shine shoes?" And Rudy says, "Well, I'll do anything." So they set up a little thing, shining shoes, and next thing you know, he had him doing janitor work, and next thing you know, he had him helping out in the golf shop, and you know, Rudy Lozano became the manager of the golf shop. He became the most popular person that ever did work here, including Tommy and I, because he was just what I would call a blue-collar guy that could relate to everybody, and everybody could relate to him, and there wasn't a better human being. And Rudy, I used to call him my brother. Now, the difference was I was 6'2", and he was about 5'5". And he was of Mexican descent, dark complexion, and I had light, and not too many people believe we were brothers, but to him and I, we were brothers.
The California State Fair Golf Championship was originally at Del Paso Country Club. It's the second most prestigious amateur event in all of California, behind the California Open. In the late 30s, it moved here to Haggin Oaks. Has had an amazing, illustrious list of former winners and players. Names like Kevin Sutherland and Ken Venturi and George Archer are on that trophy up in Mackenzie Sports Bar and Grill. I know early in your career, when you were playing more avidly and thinking about a career going out on tour before you became a club professional, there was a group of young men out of San Francisco and Sacramento that would go on to become very, very big on tour, and that was probably a golden era of Sacramento golf. And maybe dive into some of those names there and how Haggin played a role in all of that.
Well, what's really fantastic to know is he's kind of talking about the Lotz brothers, and they were named Dick and John Lotz, and they were really good young amateur players. They hit balls a lot every single day, played golf every day, and I'll never forget that when the first day they came up here, I got here real early in the second day of the tournament, and I'm walking out by the scoreboard, and here's these two guys asleep underneath the scoreboard. One was named John Lotz, and the other one was named Dick Lotz. And I couldn't hardly be prepared for realizing that Dick Lotz wound up winning the tournament with 368s. I mean, golf in those days was different, and they didn't have enough money to stay, so they wound up staying at our house the next 2 nights because I just couldn't allow them to be there underneath the scoreboard. And so we had those. Obviously, another big highlight with George Archer, who went on to win the Masters tournament, actually met his wife on the 12th hole when he was playing here in the State Fair Championship. Yes, we have Ken Venturi. It was a past winner, and we've had many tour players that came from here. And today, the State Fair tournament is a national point event for some of the best amateurs in the country to play in. So it still holds a lot of a distinction as a venue.
With the advent of the freeway going in, the original clubhouse was across the freeway. Early 50s, we came up here, and then we go into the early 90s and get a little bit closer to today. Junior golf was in the crosshairs of a lot of the local school districts. They had eliminated high school golf from a lot of them, and you started a program called Sacramento Area Youth Golf Foundation. Maybe talk about those early years and then how that evolved into the first tee.
Well, it's interesting that that you played a role in that. Here I had 2 boys, and and I realized when I was going to watch them play Little League that there was nothing in golf like Little League for baseball, and so I began to realize that there wasn't any place for young kids to come together and to play golf together. Not a kid on every block played golf at that time. So, I then decided that we needed to do some things. So I was in the middle of putting some stuff together, and the next thing I know, Prop 13 came about. And Prop 13 was something that, to reduce property tax or hold property taxes down, had a big impact on schools. And the way schools normally get you to increase taxes is tell you how much that they can't afford to have any sports programs anymore. So they were going to all eliminate golf. So we had 2 young ladies here. One was by the name of Angie Dixon, who is now the executive director of the First Tee, and another young lady by the name of Jamil Jose. Now, Jamil Jose had just that year won the National Junior Amateur Championship. And Angie had won many junior championships, and Jamil had just earned a scholarship to Stanford University, and Angie got a full ride scholarship to University of Washington. And so we got together with the men from the Sacramento Bee. We formed this 501c3 called Say Golf. And we got about 400 or 500 people with green shirts to go into the district, and then we said we would help sponsor all the junior golf teams from that point on. And today, believe it or not, we not only have junior golf teams all over Northern California, or all over Sacramento rather, but we also have now over 40 all-girl golf teams. And Angie and Jamil were the only two girls playing golf at that particular time. So lots of changes occurred because of Say Golf and the help the promotion of youth golf for high schools. Well, then Say Golf had to have created programs. And then in 1998, it became connected. It was one of the first 3 chapters of the First Tee nationally. And then for fund development, we changed the name of it to the First Tee of Greater Sacramento. And we've had, literally the First Tee program creates miracles for kids. I mean, it really is all built on core values and lifestyle things that kids need, and they don't get so much anymore.
Thank you. The last question I would have would be looking at the golf course today, and then you having this unique perspective of knowing what the golf scene in Sacramento was, 30, 40, 50 years ago. For those that might not have been playing golf at that time or been around at that time, what are the biggest differences that you see with courses today than in the 50s and 40s and here in Sacramento?
Well, we've gone from less than 40 courses in the late 1980s, early 1990s to now over 80 within an hour of downtown Sacramento. That's a major change, and people won't believe it, but I see a couple people out there that were playing golf at that time, and when you to get a weekend time, you had to go downtown at the city hall and stand in line from 4 o'clock in the morning to get a tee time for the weekends. Big Maloney Golf Course in 1991 played 109,000 rounds. Today it plays about 50,000. I mean, the advent of more courses has diluted everybody's play somewhat. In those days, there was so much play at Big Maloney we could hardly grow turf. The other thing that's really changed too is it was because of the amount of play and because we didn't have all the agronomic things that we have today, it was not uncommon to have 3 to 5, 6 greens burn up in the summertime. And golfers would just put up with it because they didn't have any other choices. Today, if you have 1 green go out, you probably lose half of your trade and it won't come back for several years. So, I mean, the whole conditioning thing at golf courses has dramatically changed. I mean, now, people play based on stimp meter readings and how fast the greens are. In those days, they were just happy to have grass. So, I mean, a lot of changes have occurred. I can remember when I was a boy growing up in town and played golf here at the city courses, we could play all day for a quarter, play as many holes as we wanted to play. Well, it's a little bit more expensive, but the kids are still pretty well taken care of with the rates and the help with the Northern California Golf Association and their Youth on Course program. So, yeah, a lot really has changed, but I think mostly for the better. Golf courses are in better condition. There's certainly a lot more of things to choose from at golf courses than we did way back then.
Well, thank you very much. We will bid adieu here to Ken Morton Sr. Please give him a big round of applause.
Thank you very much.
And we will be back on stage in about 10 minutes with John Abendroth from KNBR and Hooked on Golf.